This happened to me in the summer of 2015. I was living/working in the city at the time with my then boyfriend, who is now my husband. He was a witness to this encounter of what I believe was a goblin. My doctor said it was sleep paralysis mixed with being overworked, but I'd never had sleep paralysis before. I've never had an experience like this, period, either before or since, and I've been in many stressful situations. So, anyway, I was in bed one night next to my boyfriend, drifting in and out of sleep. It was like 2:33 in the morning. As I was lying there, I had this odd feeling that my hands were being tied together. I was lying on my side, and my hands were out in front of me, hanging over the side of the bed. In my half asleep state, I looked at my hands, but saw nothing there. And yet, my hands felt like they were bound together. I pulled my hands apart, and it was like trying to pull apart two magnets. I would pull them apart, and then they would snap back together. Confused, I looked around my dark room. I couldn't see much. I could move, but only slightly. And in that moment, I got quite angry. I felt like something was trying to hold me against my will. I swore out loud and sat up straight in bed. Blinking and groggy, I was facing the direction of my fish tank and dresser. That's where I saw the most homely, greenish gray skinned, goblin, I guess? This thing was ugly, not friendly looking at all. It had tattered clothing, old, dirty, and full of holes. The clothing was what I can only describe as old world looking, and it was holding this massive battle axe in one hand. The battle axe had strings of brown leather dangling off it, like something straight out of World of Warcraft. We made eye contact, and suddenly it jumped in the air and swung the axe at my head, like it was trying to kill me. I put up my arm in defense, and just before the axe hit me, the thing disappeared into thin air, like it was never even there. My boyfriend woke right after this took place and said, "Why are you yelling? What's going on?" A confused look on his face. I told him what had happened, and he laughed at me and said it was sleep paralysis or lucid dreaming or something like that. I sort of accepted that and tried to go back to sleep. But the more I thought about what had happened, the less sense this explanation made. I thought one of the hallmarks of sleep paralysis was, well, paralysis. I could move during this experience. I could speak. I cursed, I sat up, I lifted my arm to defend myself. I was fully upright with my arm in the air when my boyfriend woke up. So, if it wasn't sleep paralysis, what did happen to me that night? What was that thing I saw? And why was it trying to tie my hands together? The whole thing creeps me out just to think about it. But I do wonder about it sometimes. If it really happened, if it wasn't just a dream, then that means that there are creatures out there that can just enter our bedrooms at night while we're sleeping. The idea is unsettling, to say the least. I'd really like to know if there's something I can do to stop this from happening again. To defend myself. My English is not very good, so I apologize for any bad grammar. I live in a rural area, I won't say which country, where everywhere you turn there are trees. It's a peaceful, beautiful place. But I always felt there was something else out there, living amongst the trees. Several years ago, a very close uncle of mine got a job in the area as a road or highway operative who worked on building and repairing roads. One of the jobs he was tasked with was the construction of a road up in this mountain where there were many residents. When I was younger, before the roadwork started, my uncle used to bring me up there sometimes because it was so beautiful. But whenever we were up there, he would always give these warnings. He would say, "Don't spit anywhere, don't destroy anything, especially a part of nature. When you see a mound of dirt, avoid it. Be respectful," and so on. He would also tell me that there were these others that resided deep within the forest. He said we mostly don't see them, but that they could certainly see us. My uncle was nervous about doing road work up in that mountain, but it was his job and he was determined to go through with it because the road would be beneficial for the residents. Unfortunately, my uncle was right to be worried. One day while he was up there working on the road, a co-worker of his was using an excavator, making a path for where the road would be placed. The co-worker knocked down an ancient-looking collection of boulders that appeared almost to have been placed strategically next to a grove of trees. Soon after the rocks were moved, these huge red crabs came scuttling out of the ground. The workers were startled by the crabs, but they weren't in any danger, and the critters soon skittered away into the woods. And yet, my uncle had an ominous feeling, as if these red crabs were a message that they shouldn't have disturbed what they had disturbed. Soon after, the coworker who had knocked over the rocks started complaining about head, back, and neck pain. So my uncle had to take over the excavator. He continued the work, thinking all the crabs had gone, only to realize that a few of them remained in the shadows in the dirt, close to where the rocks had been. And unfortunately, my uncle accidentally killed one of the crabs. Later that same day, he started to complain about pain in his head, neck, and shoulders. That evening, close to sundown, he said he heard someone crying, but no one else could hear what he was hearing. Soon after, he fell sick and had to be brought to the hospital. He was only there for 2 days before he passed away. It was so sad and shocking to lose him because he was so young. But at the same time, I thought it was just one of those terrible things that happens sometimes. I didn't suspect that it was related to his road work or the others that live in the woods. But then something happened that made me question things. A few nights after his passing, I was at home trying to fall asleep in my room. At that time, I didn't have a proper bed, only a mattress on the floor, so that's where I lay. It was very dark, aside from the nightlight in the corner. And then someone or something came into my room. A woman came into view. She walked into the open doorway. Her skin was gray. Her face was caked with dirt and mud. Her hair was short and messy, and her face was painted with a big smile, and there was dirt between her teeth. Her eyes were almost bulging out, and her smile was not a friendly smile. She was looming over me, given that I was on the floor. She seemed to be about to say something to me when I suddenly woke up. For a minute, I was confused because I thought I was already awake, and that the woman really was there in my room, and it was not just a dream. I was relieved at the same time that it was only a dream, and eventually was able to fall back asleep. But then the next night, the same exact thing happened. This same weird awake and yet asleep dream kept happening again and again, night after night. In one of the incidents, I stood up and realized I could see my own sleeping body lying on the mattress on the floor. I walked out of the room toward the stairs. and I saw this woman standing at the bottom of the steps. I could see her clearly. She was naked, she had gray skin, and was covered with mud and soil. And she still had that creepy smile, her eyes never blinking. She took a step closer to the bottom of the stairs and started to slowly ascend, never taking her eyes off me. When she was close, I snapped awake again. These dreams, or whatever they were, eventually went away. I don't know what this means or if something was trying to communicate with me. All I know is that they started right after my uncle's death. And I thought it couldn't be a coincidence. All of this happened about 3 years ago, and I've mostly moved on with my life since then. But recently, something happened. It was on the night of April 25th, 2023. I was up late at night on my way to the bathroom. I opened the bathroom door and turned on the lights. In that same moment, I thought I saw a hand in the upper left corner of the bathroom, swaying aside the shower curtains. I thought I must have imagined it, so I opened the shower curtains and was met with nothing. Only a rectangular window which showed the darkness outside. I looked away for a second and then looked back, and there in the window was the face of a gray-skinned man with a big smile and bulging eyes with dark bags under them. He reminded me of the woman from my dream, but male. And he was also clean, no dirt or mud covering his face like the woman had. His smile was not good, but it wasn't evil at the same time, if that makes sense. He was just staring at me until I had the courage to scream. And then he was gone. And I stood there thinking, did I really just see that? I don't know what any of this means or if these stories are even connected in any way. I know this all sounds messy, but maybe that's just how it is when dealing with the fairies. And fairies are what I believe I was dealing with. I just don't know what to do. Maybe someone who hears this story will have some advice. I live in Wiltshire, England, but this story takes place at my grandmother's house in Oxfordshire when I was about 12. My grandmother had a very old 17th century cottage, and I had always loved staying there. It was cozy and otherworldly, and during the day, she let me wander the local fields, coming back when I was hungry, collecting eggs from the chickens. It always felt magical and different. My grandmother had only ever given me one piece of advice about staying there. Be respectful of nature. They watch. So I was. Then one morning, lying in my bed, I felt a tap on my head. My head was the only thing sticking out from under the covers. I was all snuggled up. Then again, another tap to the back of my head, this time with much more force. I turned my head, and sitting on my pillow was a small man. He was dressed in unusual clothes. I didn't know historical dress then, but now, many years later, it was a frock coat, waistcoat, trousers, buckled black shoes, and a black pointed hat. He smiled at me. He was about 2 inches from my face. He said, "Are you ever gonna get up?" I said, "Yes, but I'm waiting for my Gran to call. She usually does." Then he said, "She asked if I would wake you as your breakfast is cooked." And then he vanished. I had no idea what had just happened. I got dressed, went downstairs. Breakfast was on the table. My Gran said, "He got you up then. I've been calling for ages. I was now fully awake and realized that what had just happened had actually happened. My Gran looked at me and said, "Best not to ask too many questions." And she never mentioned it again. And neither did I. In retrospect, I wish I had. It's still all very clear in my memory, and just brings a smile to my face, knowing we're not the only people who live here. Hello. I'm uncertain about the significance of this particular experience, so if anyone can offer any insights, I would appreciate it. This event occurred when I was approximately 5 years old. I was sleeping in bed with my mother that night. Despite my mother sleeping peacefully and snoring away, for some reason I just couldn't fall asleep. I didn't want to risk waking her up by moving off the bed, so I resorted to playing with my belly button. Yes, I was weird, but I was wide awake. As I glanced toward the foot of my bed, where a desk was positioned against the wall, with my book bag resting on it, I realized the book bag was emitting a faint glow. No, there wasn't a toy or a light source causing this glow. There wasn't anything like that in my mom's bedroom. The next thing I remember is this strange and otherworldly vortex emerging from the light. Its form resembled that of a whale, seemingly swimming in place and gazing at me. I would have been awestruck by this sight if it weren't for the fact that I felt myself being pulled down the bed. Desperately, I dug my nails into the bed sheets, trying to call out for my mom's help. However, it seemed like she couldn't hear me or sense that I was being dragged. Eventually, I'm not entirely sure why, but the pulling sensation ceased when I was almost off the bed. It felt surreal, and when I looked back at the book bag, everything appeared normal again. However, the bed sheets still bore the marks from my nails scratching straight down. My mom finally woke up and questioned me about why I was still awake. Yet when I attempted to explain, she dismissed it as a mere dream and instructed me to go back to sleep. But I don't think it was a dream. To this day, I wonder what I saw that night, why it took the form of a whale, and what might have happened if I had entered that vortex. This encounter occurred almost 8 years ago, but the memory is as vibrant today as it was when it first happened. I was 13, and my little brother and I had been staying at my grandmother's house for the week during the summer of 2012. For some context, this house was just on the outskirts of Denver in a relatively nice neighborhood. The house itself had been built in the early 40s, and both my brother and I had a plethora of weird and scary paranormal experiences in this house. This experience, however, wasn't scary, nor had anything to do with ghosts. It was just weird. The two of us decided to escape the spooky energy of the house and build a blanket fort of sorts out in the backyard. The backyard was rather large compared to our neighbors, and although it contained a strange, boarded up and dried up well in the corner of the yard, the massive oak trees and well tended flower gardens made the space appealing. We gathered several very tall bar chairs and several sets of blankets and draped them around until we were satisfied with a somewhat bug free tent. There were no predators or large pests this close to the city, so the wall of blankets was enough to provide us with the illusion of security. We stayed up until maybe 10 p.m. or so, just staring at the stars and listening to the noise of passing cars and nighttime birds. And then, after falling asleep, I had one of the few dreams I've ever clearly remembered from my childhood. At least, I think it was a dream. I was in the same backyard. I got out of the blanket fort and found a long, elegant table resting in the middle of the yard, decorated with a gorgeous white tablecloth and dainty plates of desserts and fruit. At this table sat a group of the most beautiful people I'd ever seen. I remember thinking they reminded me of the elves from the Lord of the Rings movies, some of them masculine and some of them feminine. I sat down at their table and began conversing with them. They didn't speak any language I knew, but at the same time I understood what was being said perfectly. Of course, after the dream ended, I had no idea what we had talked about or how I understood them. I do remember saying a few things to them in their musical sounding language, and they all seemed amused and content with what I had told them. This is the part where it got weird. They asked me something very important, as if they had all been waiting until this moment to know my answer. After considering their question, I eventually told them no. They appeared displeased, but understanding, and they all just disappeared. The next thing I knew, I was back in the blanket fort, but frozen, with my eyes shut. Now, I've had sleep paralysis before, especially in that house, but this didn't feel like sleep paralysis. I wasn't afraid, and both my mind and body felt very much awake. It was almost like I could move if I had wanted to, but something told me not to. Then I felt cool, smooth hands pressing gently against my forehead. I remember a very strong scent of fresh mint as the fingers began massaging my temple, and I heard a voice humming a faint tune, and then I fell asleep again. When I woke with the sun the next morning, I chalked it all up to being a very weird dream. However, when I got up from my makeshift bed, there were little piles of crushed up mint from my grandmother's garden on each side of where my head had been. My brother was only 8 years old at the time, and we had never been the kind of siblings who would do nice little things such as massage one another's temples. We fought too much for that. When I asked him where the mint had come from, he just looked at me like I was crazy. I even asked my grandmother if she had visited our little blanket fort during the night, but she told me she'd only been briefly checking on us through the window and hadn't actually gone outside. The whole thing didn't make any sense to me. I didn't think some random stranger would sneak into my grandmother's yard just to massage my head and put some garden mint next to me. And deep down, a part of me knew the experience had something to do with my dream and the beautiful people I met there. Strangely enough, all my fits of sleep paralysis ended that night, and although my grandmother's house still contained that foreboding and creepy feel to it, it ceased to scare me as much as it used to. My grandmother moved out of that house a couple of years ago, but to this day, I've always wondered what would have happened if I had accepted whatever invitation those beautiful people had offered me, and if I still owed them something for the gift they granted me. Hello, everyone. I have a really exciting announcement. I've mentioned a few times on the channel that I've written a novel. Well, I'm finally ready to share it with you guys, and I'm really excited. The book is a young adult fantasy about a girl who lives in a town called Nothing. The town is famously haunted, but as she will soon discover, fairies might actually have more to do with this town's troubles than ghosts. The book is called The Ghosts of Nothing, and I'll be releasing it this summer, probably in July, August at the latest. In the meantime, I'm looking for people who might be interested in reading a free advance review copy of the book. Basically, I'm looking for people who are willing to review the book on Amazon, preferably, but also on Goodreads if you have an account there, or if you have a book blog or booktube channel, Instagram, TikTok, where you review or recommend things. That would be great as well. If you'd rather wait until the book is released, buy the book and leave a review then, that's wonderful too. That's amazing. So I really appreciate that as well. Reviews really help to get a book out there and spread the word, and they especially help with the Amazon algorithm, I'm told. And also, since I'm a brand new author, and this is my first novel, reviews are really important and they would really help me out. So I hope you guys will help me out with this. Unfortunately, I only have a limited number of advance review copies, though, that I can give out. So I have a form linked in the description where you can tell me about why you'd like to be considered for an advance copy, where you plan to leave your review, if you have some kind of social media channel that you think would help spread the word about the book, that kind of thing. It's not necessary that you have, a big social media following or something like that. It does help. But if you just have an Amazon account where you leave reviews, then that's pretty good too. So thank you very much. Also, I'm preferring people who really like this genre in particular. That's fantasy or young adult contemporary fantasy. So if that's a big genre for you, you're a big fan of that genre, let me know that as well. For the advance copy, only an ebook is available, but when the book comes out, there will be a paperback and a hardcover as well, if that's the format you prefer. I'll also be releasing an audio version of this book, but that probably won't be out until the fall. I really hope you guys will take a chance on this book. I had a great time writing it, and just letting my imagination about fairies and the fairy world run wild. It was a lot of fun, and I just hope you'll have as much fun reading it as I had writing it. Okay, that's it for the announcement. As usual, I'd like to thank everyone for watching and to the subscribers who submitted their stories for this one. If you have a story to share, you can check out my website at scaryfairygodmother.com, link in the description. It has a spot where you can submit your stories, comments, questions, or suggestions. You can also sign up for my mailing list there, Fairy Lights. As always, special thanks goes out to all my supporters on Patreon and to anyone who has joined the channel, made a one-time donation through PayPal or Ko-fi. I really appreciate you guys so much and the support you are giving this work. If you like this content and would like to support it, please check out my Patreon page and the other support options in the description below. The stories in this video came courtesy of subscribers, so thanks to everyone who submitted. The stories were edited for dramatic and narration reasons. Please leave a comment below about the stories, like, share, and subscribe if you're new. It really helps the channel so much when you do that, and hit the bell to receive notifications of new videos. And until next time, this has been a visit from your scary fairy godmother.